So let me, first of all, frame, I suppose, where I'm coming from. So most of my days are out in organizations talking to the people who are at the other end of the BCAS. Out talking to employees in organizations to understand their information problems, but particularly their information frustrations. Now, we don't work specifically in security, but what I've done is I've pulled together a couple of stories that relate very much to employees trying to collaborate and how security is potentially preventing from doing that. This is a frame of reference we use. It's one of our models. There's content, which is your static information. There's communications, which is more dynamic. You have activity, business systems, workflows, things like that. Culture, which is kind of mentioned in passing, which is the whole wraparound of how are people actually behaving in the organization? Are they security aware? Are they security ambivalent? Are they something else? And then collaboration and social, which when I started at Step 2 8 or 9 years ago was kind of quite new, is now becoming kind of fairly mainstream, I suppose. So what is collaboration? So it's multiple different things, and as I talk through the stories, you'll see you'll see these in a little bit more detail. But for us, collaboration is document co-creation. So people working together on documents, project team collaboration, it's business social, just having conversations in a connected way across the organization. It's knowledge sharing, face-to-face meetings, face-to-face being kind of not quite as face-to-face as it used to be. And I suppose for me, collaboration, to make collaboration work, it's about access, it's about connection, it's about openness. And we have the promise. So we have the promise of this fabulous world. This is for those who aren't familiar with the SharePoint wheel. You're probably familiar with bits of it. I have yet to meet anyone who can explain the entire thing to me in completeness. But these are the promise, okay, of a totally connected organization. You just go in and you can do anything you want with anybody you want. Fabulous. So let me tell you about seamless interconnectivity. So this is going back a few years, but I think it's still quite, like it was certainly the most memorable one for me. So I was doing some work with a major telco in Australia, and we were out doing our research out with people on the front line, because that's where the business actually happens. It doesn't happen in the corporate tower as much as out where you're facing customers. And we started talking to the manager and asking him, how does he connect into the systems? And he's got loads. He's got 15 systems. He's got customer systems, and he's got the systems that load up the mobile phones and all those sort of things. And I was asking him how he manages getting in and out of those. He says, well, I've got logins and I've got passwords. Okay, so and so how many of those do you have? So I've got one for every system. Oh, and I have a casual staff, and they're not allowed actually have passwords, so they use mine. And they're often only in 1 or 2 days a week, so they're not using the systems every day, so they can't remember it. So how does that work? Oh, I write them down. Okay. So they've solved the problem. So this is the solution to his problem. So he actually allowed me to photograph this. Now, the really scary thing was, when I said to him, where is it? He said, it's on the front counter. So it's on the front counter for a customer to come along with one of these, take a photograph. And they've just accessed, that's the keys to the kingdom. So understanding, and I think this was mentioned earlier, if you lock it down too tightly, then it becomes unworkable and people will find a way. They will always find a way through. And they're not doing it out of any malice, they're just trying to get their job done. Project collaboration, a big one. This is another example of Sydney University, not necessarily Sydney University. And we're brought in because the academics apparently didn't collaborate. We want them to collaborate more. particularly cross-faculty. So again, in talking to the academics, it turns out the academics are the most collaborative people in the whole organization. It's just that the systems that are there, they can't use because they don't collaborate with people in the university. Because academia doesn't reward you for collaborating across faculties. They reward you for going deep, which is collaborating with other similar faculties in other organizations. But again, these academics are smart, as you would expect. So how do they solve it? They put their hand in their pocket and they go and they buy, they go online and they find a solution. And so some organizations don't necessarily let you get away with this, but if that's what these academics had to do to get their work done, then that's what they did. Document co-creation. So the whole idea of multiple people working on the same document. It still amazes me today that most people still don't actually know how to use Microsoft Word in a collaborative sense, but that's a different issue. But when I was thinking about this one, I realized some people actually want to collaborate with themselves. So they're in the office, they're working on a document, they decide tomorrow I'm going to work from home. So they go home and then they're faced with Citrix, okay? And we get the smile so that, Citrix, I have yet to have somebody say, I just love Citrix, it's fabulous. But, okay, spoken like a true security person. So Citrix, it knocks them out, bumps them off. It kind of just is an unpleasant experience. So, but they solved the problem. It's called email. They email it sometimes to their work address, but more often to their personal address, because they have full access to that at home. And interestingly, despite the promise of super connected, collaborative IT, this is still the center point of collaboration for most organizations. Interestingly, when I was looking for images and I came across this one, it said email black hole. And that's still the centerpiece of collaboration. So, context is everything. It was mentioned earlier, and this is actually a current client, or a recent client. And the person who's trying to collaborate is this solicitor. She's sitting in a courtroom, and the judge makes a comment about a past case. Now, the courtroom is not as modern as many workplaces, so technology is kind of frowned upon. They let it in a little bit. So for this person to collaborate with her peers or to look up something, she has to open her laptop, log in, take out her mobile phone, get the RAS token to get into the intranet, to then link to the external service where she can then go and look up what she needs to look up. She can't do that in front of the judge. We haven't solved that problem yet. They haven't solved that problem yet. Interestingly, when we spoke to them, they said, 2 years ago we had iPads. And we were able to go straight from the iPad into the system we wanted to go to. And the iPad laid flat on the table, so it wasn't as obtrusive. And it worked beautifully. And they were all taken away, and they were given Microsoft hybrids because they were much better. So, context is everything. And even just being able to sit there and do a little bit of instant messaging with their colleagues. So they have a difficult question. Some of these people are junior lawyers. Being able to just ask a question of their peers, the entire 600 lawyers that are in the organization, would be fabulous. But the technology hasn't quite allowed them. And I think, Mikhail, you were talking about seamlessness, because that's the centerpiece of this, is give them seamless. I guess this is a slightly variation, I suppose, on the a global charity who they have people out in the field. They have people in Africa, they have people in China, they have people all over the world. And for them, business social is talking to their constituents, I guess, the people who they work with. And so they have to adopt the tools that they're using. So in China, it's WhatsApp. In Africa, it's Facebook. In other countries, it's different tools. And again, that's an incredibly difficult one to solve because despite all the promise and the money that's been spent on IT, internal IT systems are not anything near as elegant as what we have in the public space. So Twitter, although various different things. Even meetings. I'm still flabbergasted that decades on, when you go to a meeting, and I love these stock images that you buy, and they're all really happy and they're doing really cool things. How many people go into a meeting and it's 10 minutes, the obligatory 10 minutes to get the technology connected and working? Collaboration 101. And the expectations now are growing as this person now is often at home. And in fact, the idea of a room and one person dialing in is becoming less and less. It's multiple people trying to dial in. I won't share my stories about just trying to get into Skype for Business using a Macintosh. So I've just put a couple of, 2 slides of words. These used to be future considerations. These are kind of current from an end user perspective. So it's Office anywhere, Office everywhere. So whether it's the casualization of the workforce, but just simply, certainly in Australia, in many other countries, people don't want to be stuck in an office anymore. They don't need to be stuck in an office. But they're still tethered there because for half of the people I speak to, if they're not sitting at their computer in their office, they're not connected. And that has to change. Ever-increasing expectations. What we can do in the public space now is just phenomenal compared to... I can remember the time when I wished I had at home what I had in the office. We had Macintoshes, 1984, and we had, when the MacBook came out, it was fabulous. Whereas now, people want in the office what they have at home. So it's an interesting shift. And so you've got the whole digital employee experience. That's kind of the centerpiece now, what people are talking about. Was talking to Leanne earlier about, the intranet is kind of the old word in the digital workplace, but even the digital workplace now is shifting away from that language to it's the employee digital experience. That's the whole, that's at least what people are talking about. Mobility was mentioned earlier. But interestingly, I guess the sitting on the train, reading the confidential documents and somebody behind you reading over your shoulder. Digital workplace, cloud for business was mentioned. And that in some ways is the big solution because then you can connect from anywhere. And it's coming and it's going to come really fast. There's actually, I would have said, there's a crashing wave at the moment coming over many that's certainly what we're seeing. That is the what a lot of organizations now are grappling with. And these are more questions, so I have no more answers than anybody else. Like a good psychologist, I have the good questions. So are IT teams innovative productivity facilitators, or are they the corporate information police? I think a long time, like in times past, IT teams were the ones who were facilitating innovation. Whereas now, and not, it's probably unfair to point all the blame at the IT teams. They've got compliance restrictions. They have policies they have to follow. But there is a very common refrain that I hear all the time. IT don't understand the circumstances we're in. They don't understand our context. Is a default open approach inherently more secure? So it was kind of touched on earlier. If I can find information in the organization, well, then it's okay for me to see it, right? Because we're super locked down. Whereas if you open up internally to people and say, you have to be responsible for the information then that you disseminate, it changes the mindset. Should governance so should governance be more about empowerment than enforcement? Certainly we advocate that it should be about empowerment, not enforcement. Using IT systems to compensate for bad management. We see that a lot. We want the system to fix the problems. Like, yeah, but the problem isn't the system. The problem is the way everything's being managed. I think this is quite interesting, bringing AI. I've seen recently some of this machine learning in the background that are monitoring the way activities are happening. And if it sees unusual stuff, then it flags it. So if you've been away, if you're away on 3 weeks holidays and suddenly there's an email spike in the middle, okay, what's going on there? So there's some interesting stuff happening there. And leave you with, if you don't spend time with your employees, how can you best support their collaboration initiatives? Because you don't know what it is you're trying to solve. It's not just about technology.